So you met with some of the organizers for the march for some high school students about gun violence and gun regulations. What were some of their thoughts and how did they align with your thoughts?
First of all, I want to give enormous credit to these students, because what these students are doing are bringing fresh voices to old, tired debates. And they're making it clear they're not looking at this as a Democratic or Republican kind of issue. They just want some common sense approaches at the federal and state level, in particular, with respect to gun violence, and I'm going to do everything I can to help them.
So you would say that your views align with their views on
I'm very comfortable with what they're advocating, and it seems to me you have to start with the fact we need an airtight system of background checks with absolutely no loopholes, because there is absolutely no reason why someone who's got a mental health problem or has been convicted of domestic violence, and for Pete's sakes, if you're on the terrorist watch list, it seems to me we all ought to say that's the kind of person who shouldn't have a gun.
The debates and the interest in gun regulations tend to be cyclical when we have shooting massacres, in terms of it happens, there's large flare-ups in interest, and it tends to die down. How do you keep interest in an issue like that?
I believe students are going to prove that this time is different. And I'm going to let them unveil some of their ideas, but they had some very good suggestions to hold elected officials and candidates accountable. The reality is that political change doesn't start in Washington, D.C. or Salem and then trickle down. Political change is bottoms up, and I think these young people are committed to making sure this time they go the distance and get real reforms.
The last time that I talked to you, you said that you thought it was possible there could be congressional gun regulations passed without a Democratic majority. Do you still believe that's true?
I continue to believe that real change doesn't start in Washington, D.C. It starts at the grassroots, and when enough elected officials understand that citizens want something different, it's going to happen. And I think the best example recently is Florida. Florida had one of the legislatures that was most resistant to common sense changes. Their governor wasn't sympathetic, and it certainly wasn't all that I would have done. But for Florida, it's a big difference.
The midterms aren't that far away. In terms of local turnout, as you've been talking about, and getting a Democratic majority, what are going to be the issues that you're focused on heading into?
I think the big issue will still be middle-class folks who so often are just walking on an economic tightrope. They're trying to balance the food bill against the fuel bill and the fuel bill against the housing bill. And they would just like to be in a position to get ahead and be in a position to make sure they can educate their kids and maybe afford a vacation and a home, and too many folks aren't able to do that. So what I'm going to be focusing on matters like changing tax policy. This last tax bill is principally for those at the very top. And the middle class make up 70% of the economy, and most middle class folks, when I'm having town meetings, tell me they didn't get a whole lot out of this tax bill.
You were down in Prineville yesterday, right?
Yesterday, last couple of days, I've been in Prineville and I've been in Paisley. And a lot of folks may not know how many people live in Paisley. It's 241. I've opened meetings to everybody, and I said, look, I'm from Portland. I love Portland. I wish I could have played on the Trailblazers. I went to school on a basketball scholarship. That was kind of a dream that wasn't going to happen. But I'm not a United States Senator to represent the state of Portland. I'm a United States Senator to represent every blade of grass in our state. We talked about things like broadband access, which is key for their health care, improved transportation, sustainable forestry policies that put folks back to work. Those are the kind of common sense issues that people are going to be focusing on in the fall.
You've been outspoken against President Trump, outspoken in favor of a thorough investigation from Chief Counsel Robert Mueller. The most recent reports say that the president's attorneys have submitted a number of pages saying the president can't commit obstruction of justice. From your perspective, does that carry any weight?
Well, first of all, let me give my take with respect to the president. When he is off base, in my view, I will oppose it very strongly. I think, for example, this ZTE situation, this big company where it looks like they're getting free ride after they violated the Iran and North Korea sanctions, I don't think makes sense. It's not in line with the president's policies, announced policy to get tough with China. I did support his nominee to the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. So the Oregon way is to call them like we see them. And with respect to the investigation, my principle is real simple. Nobody is above the law. And I am very hopeful that what the Judiciary Committee did, which is on a bipartisan basis, passed legislation to improve the prospects that the special counsel is actually going to be able to do their work. I hope Mitch McConnell will bring that to the floor. In terms of bipartisan work, I know in the past couple days you, along with another Democratic senator, 2 Republicans, called for the Department of Homeland Security to release documents related to, I believe it's phone surveillance in Washington, D.C. What's happening? Well, what you have is essentially stingrays. These are cell-site simulators engaged in surveillance activity. I'm on the Intelligence Committee, but when you have it in Washington, D.C., and you have a lot of news reports that the president is using an unsecured phone, that should be a real wake-up call. Do you think we're going to get progress in terms of getting that information out? We have a bipartisan coalition that's very troubled by what the administration is doing. Look, the reality is that smart policies in the technology field give you security and liberty. The two are not mutually exclusive. Bad policies give you less of both. You're a noted sports fan. As we're talking now, Russell Wilson talking about bringing a baseball team possibly to Portland. Would you like to see that? I would love to see Major League Baseball in Portland. Obviously, there are going to be some challenges. If you go to one of my town meetings in the metro area, parents are going to come and say, hey, look at the class size that we're dealing with. Let's just make sure there's money for schools. But in terms of where my heart is, I would love to see Major League Baseball in Portland. Is there anything that you guys have working behind the scenes that you think people need to know about? Well, I do want people to get a take on what we're going to be dealing with in terms of the fire season. My sense is that May has been really dry, and we could be looking to a very challenging fire season. Now, Mike Crapo and I, he's the Republican senator from Idaho, got some important legislation passed to put a better focus on fire prevention by ending something called fire borrowing. And I think that is going to help. We also got some management reforms. It's called the Good Neighbor Program, so we can go in there and clean out some of the dead and dying materials. But I'm concerned this could be another very challenging fire season. Talking with one of my executive producers behind the scenes, and I believe he said that you were part of passing some of the first internet privacy regulations, but it was many years ago. Do you think we are up to date in terms of internet privacy? I suppose you could tie this in with your stingrays happening in Washington, D.C. Is enough being done to protect the American people? No, and I had a chance. I was Oregon's first new senator in 30 years, and I came to the Senate and I said, look, we've always been about forest products. I'm going to fight like crazy in order to promote those rural jobs, but we're going to get into some new areas. So I got a chance to really write the rules of the road for the internet tax freedom legislation. That's really important for our small businesses. The digital signatures bill, which you often use now when you're dealing with forms for buying a home or something like that, and also the bill that created the incentives, in effect, for people to invest in technology. The privacy laws have not kept up with the times, and we need to have reforms, and they need to be built around one simple principle, and that is the individual has got to be able to control their own data. The president's meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, briefly called off, appears to be back on now. Do you think that that relationship and their nuclear standing is headed in the correct direction? Is it happening the way that you'd like to see it? This story looks like it's going to have a lot of chapters, and I just hope the ending is a positive one. Now, it does look like at least they're doing the methodical preparation this time that doesn't seem to have been done before, when John Bolton, for example, just compared the North Korean situation to Libya, and everybody just said, everybody remembers what happened to Gaddafi. On the other hand, it looks like in the last few days, the president doesn't seem to want to go bold. And if you don't go bold, you're likely to end up much like the previous Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. And what happened there was Democrats and Republicans settled for some modest measures. Then the Koreans cheated. We caught them cheating. And then they said they wanted more in order to satisfy the original modest measures. We go in now with a couple of real advantages. We have the tough sanctions from the United Nations, arguably the toughest we've ever seen in the trade area, and we also have China that has finally said we have had enough with what North Korea is up to. I don't want to see us fritter those advantages away.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you think is?
I think we've covered a lot of ground.
I think so as well. Do the Cavs have a chance in this series?
Well, once our folks went out, I stopped rooting passionately, but as a Westerner, I'm always going to stay West.
Okay. Senator Wyden,
thank
good to see
you.
you as always.
Thanks
so much for your time.